I would like to extend a warm welcome to all our listeners for joining us in our final live webinar of 2024. We are excited to announce that we have an array of compelling topics and distinguished guests lined up for 2025. Links to our previously recorded webinars and the Station 1902 podcast channel will be included in a follow-up email. As the Director of Training and Education at Provident, I've had the privilege of traveling across the country and meeting with many fire and EMS leaders. 8 years ago, I began volunteering with the First Responder Center for Excellence, which is where I first met Chief Frank Leeb of the FDNY. Chief Leeb will soon share more about his background. I'm honored to call him a friend, and I can attest to his unwavering dedication to firefighter health, safety, and effective leadership. And I can't think of a better person to finish 2024 with our webinars than Chief Frank Leeb. Chief, turn your camera on and introduce yourselves to our listeners.
All right. Hello, Ed. Hello, everybody. Thanks for having me on. And so retired from the FDNY after almost 32 years back in June, and took on the position as the Managing Director of the First Responder Center for Excellence. I've also been a volunteer firefighter in the East Farmingdale Fire Department since I'm 14 years old, so more than 40 years in the fire service, and I'm excited to be on here, especially wearing a couple of different hats, both as a career and volunteer. I think I have an understanding of some of the issues that face the fire service from the unique perspective of having been a career and volunteer firefighter. So, and also the pleasure of knowing Ed and being a friend of Ed for many years now. So I appreciate being on this podcast with you on the webinar.
Well, I'm just glad we were finally able to lock you down and that you were able to spend more than one day in one place. You certainly hit the ground running when you became the managing director. You have not let any grass grow under your feet. I will say that. So, as usual with our webinars, a couple of quick slides to let everybody know who Provident is. So Provident got its start in 1902 in the city of Pittsburgh as an independent insurance agency. It started serving volunteer fire departments with a customized accident and health policy in 1928. So they've been in the business a long time. Today, we provide volunteer combination and career firefighters, emergency medical responders with a multitude of programs. We're also now breaking into the law enforcement community with our insurance policies. We're celebrating our 7th year as a top insurance employer, as indicated by the Insurance Business of America magazine. So quickly, as I mentioned earlier, the accident health program is where Provident got its start. The biggest part of our accident health program I always like to put out is if you are an accident health customer of ours, you and your immediate family have access to our 24-hour-a-day first responder assistance program, which is managed by Behavioral Health Systems in Baltimore, Maryland. We also offer a 24-hour accidental death and dismemberment policy, which provides insurance for your members when they're both on and off duty. We have a group term life policy, our critical illness and cancer policy, and we've been in the property and casualty business now for about 6 years. And if you're a client with our property and casualty, you have access to our Fire Plus Academy, which is managed through Fire Rescue One with over 800 courses. And something I want to point out on the accident health program, recently in several states, we now offer a cancer rider benefit, which pays for an initial diagnosis with cancer. Our next webinar, and the first one in 2025, is January the 14th. I'll have a consultant and at least 2 other fire chiefs on, and we're going to have a discussion. So you want to merge, fasten your seat belts and hold on. Mergers and consolidations are becoming a very big issue across the fire service and EMS as well. So we thought we'd start the new year with a webinar on mergers and consolidations. And tonight, as I already indicated, Chief Leeb's here to talk about navigating current and emerging challenges in the fire service. And having listened to him speak before, if he starts to talk real fast, I'll slow him down because you'll need an interpreter with his New York accent. Now he's smiling, but I torment him about that all the time. But you're going to learn a lot tonight if you listen. Please don't be afraid to ask questions. Here's a guy that's had a lot of street experience in this business, having retired from the FDNY. So here's an opportunity for you to pick his brain. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And Chief, it's all yours.
Thank you, Ed. Yeah, and I'm going to talk fast because especially now I'm excited. I'm trying to keep up with the chat at the same time, which never works. But I see.
So to help you out, we'll keep an eye on the chat and the questions. And I'll try to feed them to you so you don't have to interrupt your flow with your program. How's that sound?
That sounds great. But I see in Newmarket Volunteer Fire Department in the house, several North Carolina, South Carolina, Dina Alley, who's our program manager for behavioral health, Juneau, Alaska in there. I see New Jersey in there, some Long Island in there. So, it's pretty cool to see. I see Texas in the house with Kyle just popping up, and it's pretty cool. East Farmingdale, my volunteer department. Thanks for the support from my department. But there's so many things that I want to talk about. Even Australia in the house, I see. So Canada's in the house. See everybody. PK, my buddy from Berkeley. So it's pretty cool to see so many people, so many like-minded people. And I like to say, in the fire service, we're all pulling in the same direction, but sometimes we need to do a better job of we're all pulling on we need to get on the same rope, right? Not just in the same direction, but on the same rope for the betterment of everybody, because we're stronger together. And I just think the opportunity to come on to a webinar like this, where basically, Ed, you told me, hey, what do you want to talk about? I said, let's talk about what's emerging in the fire service, because there's a lot of things that we should be aware of, not just health and wellness, but on the fireground as well. So, Ed, I'm gonna share my screen and go over some of the things that I put together here. So, the title, as you know, is Navigating Emerging Challenges in the Fire Service. You can see on the side there, I love QR codes. Those that know me know that. And as we're finishing up the annual report for the First Responder Center for Excellence, it had at least 15 different QR codes. So it's going to be kind of interactive when you see that in the online version. And because we could give you a lot more information that way. So that is to my link tree, which has probably 100 different links to different articles and podcasts and different resources that I've been involved with, or resources that I've been requested to provide multiple times. So you have that as the first QR code of the night. So this presentation could be called Things That Pissed Me Off as well. I say that jokingly, of course, because like I said, it's just some of the things that we should be aware of, because the fireground, the fire service, what we do is constantly evolving. But the first thing I want to share with you is something that went live actually today. And the First Responder Center for Excellence, in conjunction with Skidmore College, put together a 40-day fitness program for new recruits. So while this is geared towards new recruits, it's actually good for anybody who's looking to restart on their fitness journey, to being physically fit for the fire service. So I can tell you that when I was the chief of the fire academy and the chief of training in the FDNY, the number one predictor of whether somebody was going to be successful in graduating Proby class was the fitness level that they came into Proby school with. So if your nutrition is well, if you're sleeping well, if you're physically fit, you're going to do better, because you don't have to worry about all of that. You can worry about it on the academics. So this is brand new. It was only launched about 3 hours ago. And it is a fantastic program. So somebody who's trying to get into the fire service, this is perfect for them, or somebody who's looking to restart. You're looking for a New Year's resolution? Here you go. Start right here. go on to the website there. With our APS is our who hosts it. They're our learning management partner, and we have other classes on there as well. But this one is a really good one, a 40-day fitness program. Aaron Zamzow, who works with us on our fitness programs, he is the lead instructor for that, and I think you'll find the journey worthwhile. So share it, use it, and yeah, the more the better. So that's the first thing I want to share. The second new thing I want to share is that the FRCE is one of the plans that we want to do in the next couple of years is we want to give away as many gear bags as we can. So that costs money, so we'll need sponsorship. So if you know anybody that's looking to sponsor some gear bags, we're going to put logos on there, but we just got our prototype delivered, and we're going to go with green gear bags. Just like decon buckets are green, we're going to switch it to green because green is the color of safety, and red is the color of red bag waste, and that. So we're gonna change the way we look at this and make sure that we are protecting ourselves from contaminants on and off the fire ground. I believe that our gear, especially when it's dirty, is one of the simplest ways that we could better protect ourselves. And far too often, we see firefighters putting gear in their car or transporting gear wherever they're bringing it and not adequately protecting themselves. And that's the simplest way that you can put it in a gear bag and protect yourself. Put it in a clear plastic bag first, and then put it in there. So those are the two things that I want to share with you that are brand new initiatives that we're looking to do. I mentioned that I'm now the managing director of the First Responder Center for Excellence, a position that I actually started last February when I took over from the managing director that was there, Ed Klima. He did a great job getting it to the point that it was, and now we're able to build off of the success that it had. So the First Responder Center for Excellence is an affiliate organization of the National Fallen Firefighter Foundation. The National Fallen Firefighter Foundation does a fantastic job honoring our fallen brothers and sisters. So my job is, as the managing director, is to put the NFFF out of business and make it where they don't have anybody to honor. That at the end of the day, it's about making sure that firefighters aren't prematurely, their families aren't meeting the NFFF. So I joke around with the CEO of the NFFF and the FRCE, Victor Stagnaro, telling them that I want to put him out of business, which basically means I don't want to honor the number of firefighters that we're honoring every year. It should be unacceptable to all of us that every year at the Memorial Weekend at the National Fire Academy, that we honor over 200 firefighters, both from on scene, from injuries and that they get killed on scene, but also cancer and other things that have taken too many firefighters prematurely. So we could do better, and that is the goal of the FRCE, to make sure that the NFFF never gets to meet your families. And it's all about the stuff that I consider the blind side for firefighters. These are all the health and wellness issues that impact firefighter safety. It's the importance of the left tackle on the football field to protect the firefighter's blind side. So we could be brilliant at the basics. We're talking about engine operations, stretching a hose line, forcing a door, cutting a roof, whatever it is, auto extrication, and we're brilliant at that. And then around the outside, we get sacked by cancer. We get sacked with hearing loss. We have a problem with cardiovascular, heart attacks, stress, suicide, PTSD, all of these different things. We're not eating well. We're not sleeping well. They all add up, and we need to do better. Again, we are brilliant at the basics, and we forget about the firefighter blind side, and they wind up getting us when we're not expecting it or when we're least expecting it. See, these are the other aspects that enable firefighters to achieve tactical superiority on the fire ground. And that's what it's all about, is making sure that we are healthy, safe, and resilient to be able to continue to fight fires for as long as you may want to do that, whether that's 20, 30, 40 years. And on the volunteer side, it's usually a lifelong volunteering. And that's important. And that's what we want to make sure we do. Because the bottom line is oftentimes we take better care of our tools than we do ourselves. And think about that. And I talk about the Halligan, right? The Halligan, one of the greatest tools ever invented for the fire service. And the Halligan will never get cancer. You have an increased probability of getting cancer in your career. But there's simple things that we can do to best protect the firefighter blind side. And that is some of the stuff that we're trying to do at the First Responder Center for Excellence. And we're going to get into some other training programs as we're able to get into it, and not just focus on some of those issues, the blind side issues, because I like to say two things, right? Lead with fire, talk about fire first, and then you get everybody's attention. But also, I like the trail mix approach. And my favorite trail mix is a bag of peanut M&Ms. I love peanut M&Ms, and you can keep all the granola. But the truth of the matter is, the peanut M&Ms gives you the energy that you need now, and the granola and all the other stuff in it is what gives you the strength and the fortitude down the road. And that's what we're talking about. Behavioral health, all of these things are the granola, and the peanut M&Ms is the fire, talking about fire and stuff. So when we talk about safety, and there's a lot of debate about this, right? So can we be safe, and can we be aggressive, and all of this, and what is safety? And so here's what safety is. Safety is a byproduct of your training. When I go on scene, I remember as a firefighter, I would go on scene and I wasn't thinking, oh, I better be safe here. I was a well-trained firefighter into the job. And because I trained every day, that was a byproduct. I was naturally operating safer because I understood looking at it. I knew how to read smoke. I knew building construction, all these different things that enable you to operate more aggressively, more efficiently, more effectively, and safer on the fire ground. So I don't believe firefighters arrive on scene and conscientiously think about safety. Safety is that program running in the back of your computer. It's like the virus protection on your computer. You have it, it's there, and it's invisible. It's invisible because it's running and protecting you. Our training protects us. Our training is the byproduct. Safety is the byproduct of our training. And that is a critical difference. And that's why you think about, if you were to tell a civilian, go rescue that person from the second, they'd probably operate dangerously because they don't have training. Where if you told a 10-year firefighter that has some training, they would pick the proper window, the window that maybe isn't going to flash over right away. They might pick the bathroom, they might pick the window that's not the bathroom because they recognize the different windows. They may understand all of these different things. That's a byproduct of their training. And that's the difference, the well-trained. And what are we talking about? So in today's fire environment, if you don't train, you're lost. And there's so many different examples of this. Larger homes, open spaces, evolving fuel loads, new technologies, all of these different things that continue to evolve. And if our firefighters don't understand what we're talking about, we could wind up in big trouble. Even reading smoke. If you don't understand the volume, velocity, density, color, stratification of fire, of the smoke, you're at a big disadvantage. I look at this building here. This building is taken from a fire in New York City. The hose line is going up to that second floor there. And if they were to take that line, so you can see from the smoke, because the smoke is halfway up. So they'd already popped the door, the line's starting to go in, and the smoke is halfway. That's a pretty good indication that the fire is on that level. If the fire was below them, we would have smoke likely banked down to the floor. Again, the door's already opened. It had a chance for it to lift a little bit. And now it's at that level. So we can see that that's where the fire is. We can see that from outside. But what if that fire was below them and they didn't read the smoke? See, in this building, if we went to that stair below that stoop that they're going up, that would put us on the basement level. And the problem with that is that when you go in there, there's also another level down into the cellar. By definition, a cellar is more than 50% below grade. By definition, a basement has more than 50% above grade. That building has both. Now, that company knows that because they're familiar with their area. They were able to put the line in the proper floor. But what if that fire was in the cellar and they put that line up there? There would be 2 floors above the fire floor. And they would have a heck of a time going down, no matter how aggressive they are, if they had to go from that second floor down into the basement and then down into the cellar. So understanding that volume, velocity, density, all of these different things. Is the fire extending? Is the fire in the front of the building? Is it in the rear of the building? All of these different things. Is the fire getting bigger? We could tell just by reading smoke. Little things that equal big results on the fire ground without even going inside. That's just part of our 360, and we would have a tactical and a strategic advantage just by something like that. So how about the difference between if we had one candle burning versus 10 candles burning? So ask a firefighter or think to yourself, do you know the difference? Would one candle be the same temperature as 10? And the answer is yes, the temperature is going to be the same. The difference is the heat release rate. The heat release rate will be 10 times the amount. Now, why is that important? Because today's modern synthetic contents burn and they need more air. They need more oxygen. They are starving for oxygen. That is why when we arrive, we see ventilation limited fires much more often than we used to. So if a firefighter is untrained, one firefighter can have an oversized impact on the fireground. One firefighter shows up and you're the incident commander or you're inside operating searching, and you know that we can maintain this fire ventilation limited and I could search safely because the fire can only get as big as the amount of air that we give it. So if we could control all of the ventilation points, and we did our ventilation profile, and we were able to determine that, okay, we're going to keep this fire ventilation limited. And then that one firefighter showed up with a 6-foot hook and started breaking windows, and your strategy goes in the trash because that one firefighter doesn't understand fire dynamics, doesn't understand temperature versus heat release rate. Little things make a big difference on the fireground. So along those lines, do you recognize these two different buildings? One of them I took in Woodland Hills, California, the nail salon on the right, and the other I took in Florida, in St. Petersburg, Florida, I think it was, or Clearwater, Florida. And what you see is roll downs on the inside of a store. So we show up to either of these places, and they're relatively small. So we may show up to this in the middle of the night, and it could be ventilation limited. But now we're going to have to force the door, and then we're going to have to force the roll down. I see these all over the place now. And not just these type. I've seen the metal roll downs that are going to really be a challenge, and they're putting them inside. So think about this. We show up to this, and we have to force this door. It's going to take us a couple of minutes, and the fire may grow in that time frame once we force that front door, and then we have to force the roll down. That is a game changer. We have to make sure that we're looking at our communities and understanding what we see. And the nail salon on the right, one of the pictures I took when the place was closed, and the other was when it was open. But if they have the blinds down, you may not even know it. The time to learn about that is not 2 o'clock in the morning. So if you have a fire, we have to make sure that we have hand lines in position and we're able to fight this fire, ready to go, because we know we're going to have a delay in water application, at least hose line advancement. But we could have a line ready and have water application pretty quickly. Little things that we need to be aware of, because once we open this door, we are going to give the fire air. What are we talking about? Well, so here's the traditional diagrams that we're used to. A fire control, fuel controlled fire, inception, growth, fully developed. It starts to burn everything that it has. The fuel, it goes into decay. Then we have the ventilation controlled. Ignition, growth, decay begins, and then you see it drops down. It says change in ventilation, the oxygen, when oxygen reacts to the fire, and it goes back up to fully developed. Some of these say fire department arrives, and then the fire goes to fully developed. And I would say, no. If the fire department arrives and it goes to fully developed, that means we do not control ventilation. So we have to make sure that we are controlling that and keeping that ventilation control. So what does that look like? Well, this is what it looks like, and this is what the FDNY put into their ventilation bulletin several years ago. So we have the incipient fire. It goes ventilation limited. It goes into that early decay. And then we have that time frame that I call the elongated decay. And that is the effective operational time frame that we can fight the fire. If we maintain it ventilation limited, we can operate in there. And I'm not talking about just a door or a small window, because the fire is going to react to that, but it may not react. It's not going to react to it like and we're going to lose total control of it. It's about maintaining, when a line goes in or somebody goes into search and we open it a little bit, just know that the fire is going to react proportionately to the amount of air that we give it. Again, because we're talking about a ventilation limited fire because of the energy density of today's contents, which is why we have the higher heat release rate versus the temperature in that candle diagram that we saw earlier. Then what happens during that elongated decay, the hose line is ready to go in, because in this scenario, maybe the truck company or the searching crew was searching without a hose line, or in an area, in exposure, wherever it was. And now the hose line is ready to go in. And now we coordinate that ventilation with suppression. We don't want to let the ventilation get ahead of our suppression activities to the point where we are indiscriminately opening up windows and doors and the roof, and then we lose control. And that is the challenge. So I present to you this picture. One is a taxpayer strip mall type occupancy, picture that I took in Corona, Queens, and the other is a factory type of occupancy. And from a ventilation standpoint and fire attack and strategy standpoint, do you understand and see the differences in these? So if I was the incident commander and I showed up to the building that's on the left, that strip mall or taxpayer, and I see those couple of roll down gates, I am going to have the truck company open all of those up. And why would I do that? Because behind that is going to be glass. So we're still going to be able to maintain the occupancy and not give it air indiscriminately. But then you take that factory occupancy on the right, and you look at those three arrows that are to the roll down gates, those roll down doors. When we open those doors, there is likely nothing behind that. So if we have a fire in there and it is smoldering and it needs air, well, we're going to give it all the air it needs. So if we're going to do that, we need to make sure that we either choose the right door, and you can see this one's a small, one's a window, and one looks like it's a doorway, and that doorway would be optimally the first entrance point that we would go into that. We could maintain it potentially in a limited ventilation limited state. But sometimes you're not going to be comfortable with that. And I get that. And I understand that. So if we're going to open up those roll down gates, and maybe you decide because of my staffing or whatever the reasons that you want to see the fire, and then we're going to use the tower ladder. Well, just make sure that you're aware of that and you plan for that. So make sure before we just go opening up those roll down gates that we have the ability to suppress that fire in place. Because if that just comes roaring, if we get fire out those roll down gates after we showed up and we weren't ready for that, we should expect that if we open those doors and don't put water on the fire. However, we can open up those doors, have tower ladders ready to go or hand lines, and apply water in there on what could potentially be black fire that's burning or whatever it is that we may have going on, but we might be able to control that instead of letting it just go into a free burning fire and burning the entire occupancy. So a couple of different strategies that we can employ depending on your buildings, on your staffing, on your training, right? So, but ideally we maintain that by going through the front door. And then if we're going to open those and let the fire show itself, know that we should have our hose lines in place beforehand. So know the difference. Some of them have, the ones on the left, the strip mall taxpayer, they have roll downs and glass behind it. The other one, the roll downs aren't going to have glass behind it, and we're not going to be able to control that opening once we take that. So make sure that that is part of your strategy upon arrival. And even if you pre-plan these buildings, we need to understand that. And that fire is going to be a lot easier to extinguish if it's in a ventilation limited state as opposed to free burning and roaring out those three roll down gates.
So Chief, I want to give you a chance to catch your breath for a second.
Thank you, Ed.
So I've been at Provident. It'll be 10 years come February. Prior to that, as a state fire commissioner, probably, I don't remember what year it was now. This is when all the fire dynamics hit the streets. Okay. And I can remember we brought the staff together at the State Fire Academy. Okay. We need to do, I went to Kirby Kerber's programs, Dan Madrikowski's program, and the decision was made. We needed to create curriculum so our adjunct instructors could go teach people this fire dynamics. And I remember one of the adjunct instructors made the statement, this is a bunch of hogwash. And I immediately told him that if he didn't want to teach it, there's the door, leave. My point is, this has been around for a while. And as I travel, I still run into people that don't comprehend the term fire dynamics. They don't understand it. They don't understand the terms ventilation limited. So my point is, where can they go get this training without having to travel anywhere?
Well, so certainly when it comes to the fire behavior or fire dynamics, UL has put together a lot of good classes on their website, on their learning management platform, and that's all free of charge. And so I came on the FDNY in 1992, and in 1992, when we were teaching search, we didn't just indiscriminately break windows and doors. We would go into a bedroom, and one of the first things you did was try and get to the door and close the door. So it buys you time to search in that room. So a lot of the terminology is more common frame of reference, common terminology. But so it's called fire dynamics now, so it's cool, but it's fire behavior. It's the same stuff that we've been talking about. When we talk about black fire, Andy Fredericks, in some of his first articles in the late 1990s, he speaks about black fire. That's the first time I ever heard of the term black fire, was from Andy Fredericks. And what is black fire? Well, black fire is superheated gases coming out of a window so smoke is fuel. So it has fuel, it has heat. What it's missing is oxygen. And what happens is that black fire comes out, and I have a video that will play in a little bit of that. And what you get is vent point ignition. So when that black fire comes out the window, it's too rich to burn inside, which means you have a superheated area with a lot of burnable material, a lot of fuel. Like I said, it's smoke. The smoke is fuel. All of that, and it's just missing the oxygen. So when it lops out that window and gets the right mixture, it ignites. So we have to recognize what that is. That means inside doesn't have enough oxygen to burn. The oxygen level is already low. We already have a condition that's superheated, and it's going to be difficult for somebody to survive in there. Now, if they're low in an area that they may be able to survive, we got to get in there and search for them as soon as possible. But recognizing what that means on arrival is critically important. And we see that more often with what is burning today than what was burning 20, 30 years ago. You're on mute, Ed.
What makes the vent-limited fire easier to extinguish than others?
That's a great question, because it's an unstable fire. So, and it was really cool. So UL did the studies, and they show you how many gallons of water they need to put out, like a 10 by 10 compartment. And I was recently at a fire conference in Pensacola, Florida, and Kyle Rombagus was talking. He shows this 10 by 10 room, and he puts up like 73 of them on the screen, 77 pictures of a 10 by 10 room fully involved. And he says, the amount of water you have on your rig can put this out, because his example is, how much water do you need to put out to knock down a 10 by 10 room? Well, if it's fully involved and it's ventilation, it becomes ventilation limited, you don't need a lot. Take a shed, light a shed on fire, and take a 2.5 gallon extinguisher, and you could get a pretty good knock on that shed just with that. So, and then he said, what if it took you 30 seconds? And I'm thinking, 30 seconds? If it took you 30 seconds to knock down a 10 by 10 room, you're in the wrong profession. But even that, he said, you could do it 26 times with the amount of water on your rig. So it's an unstable fire, and it doesn't take as much. It does not take as much water to knock that down when it's in a ventilation limited fire, because it's starving. It's air to the fire is like spinach for Popeye. And if you don't give Popeye spinach, Popeye starts to get weak. The fire starts to get weak and easier to contain when it doesn't have enough air. And there's fires that we go to where you have fire totally out the window, fill in the window, and that's a ventilation limited fire, because if we gave it more air, the fire would expand. But because there's not enough, and then you get into the flow path of it is a bidirectional flow, is a unidirectional flow. If you show up and you have a second floor front window, and it's all flames coming out that window, that's telling you that I have an opening somewhere else. Now, sometimes it's pretty obvious. It's the front door. That's what one of the engineman delight, right? The engine firefighter delight is a second floor fire front with right in there, and you go right up the front door and blow it right out. It's perfect, because you're going in the flow path, but you're on the right side of the flow path. You're on the inlet. So taking the inlet in, you go right upstairs with all the clean air, and you're able to put the fire out. And even that, and I wasn't planning on talking about this, but the low intake and high exhaust is one of the most dangerous situations that we could be in. So we have a cellar fire, a basement fire, that has a intake, so a walkout cellar or a door or a window on a lower level, and that vents, and we come in the front. Well, that low vent, that's going to be the inlet, and guess where we are? We're now in the outlet. So we're where the fire wants to go. So that low intake and that high exhaust is where we don't want to be in that flow path, because even without wind, we would have a velocity driven fire. That low intake, high exhaust, once the firefighter gets trapped in that, it's very difficult to survive. Oftentimes you're going to have some type of injury.
So my point of bringing all this up was you don't have to travel. You don't have to spend a lot of money to get the training. You go to the ulfsri.org website. You create an account. You can set in your basement in your BVDs with your coffee and look at video after video after video that proves the science. That's the point I'm trying to make to our listeners. If you haven't studied it, you don't have to travel. Get online and take advantage of what's out there already. And use the UL training website. So I'm going to turn my camera off and let you get on a roll again.
Yes, I appreciate that. And yeah, Ed, you're so right. There's so much that we could learn, and that's why, again, I'm trying to hit a lot of different topics. The things that, I say is the things that piss me off, but in a way, it's also the things that keep me up. Because we see these things and we need to make sure that the fire service is paying attention and evolving to meet the changing environment that we're fighting fires in. And in some cases, maybe we're not fighting fires in them yet, but at some point we will. So fire dynamics, fire behavior, understanding building construction, understanding reading smoke, critically important to what we're doing. And all of these, so the whole ecosystem of the fire service is all interrelated. I started talking about some of the stuff that the First Responder Center for Excellence is doing with behavioral health, with cancer. So cancer in the fire service is directly related to what is burning today, as opposed to what was burning in the 1960s. Cancer was a problem in the fire service in the 1960s, but it wasn't until firefighters were much, much older, 60 years or older, because that's when the general population sees an increase in cancer. The fact that we're seeing cancer in younger firefighters is related to what's burning today. So it's all part of what we need to know, which is why I keep interspersing it, because this is the ecosystem of what we're doing. And the next topic on that line is pictures that you see here that I just took this past week, but you can take these in any community around the country. And these are these huge garden style apartments. Sometimes they're all wood like this. Sometimes they're pedestal and there'll be a concrete first and second floor. Oftentimes there'll be a parking garage on the first floor or second floor. Sometimes they'll be commercial. A lot of times it's commercial. These that I took the picture of, these are residential and they're going to be enormous. And you can tell how tall these are going to be because you can see on that the bottom picture that shows what the stairwell is going to be. And a lot of the data that goes back a couple of decades tells you that basically the stairwells are some of the safest places in these buildings. And we see this when these burn down, is that the stairwells are often the last part of the structure that is standing. However, what I have seen recently, at least twice now, was I've seen a stairwell that was built of tilt slab construction, which means that may not be the safest part in the building. And tilt slab construction, what they do, it's prefab off-site. They put the four corners up, they brace them until the roof holds it all together. So the importance of knowing what's in your area. And then if you look at these photos, you see that there's a lot of wood, there's a lot of void spaces. Yes, these buildings are going to be sprinkled, but we have to make sure that we're prepared. What if the sprinkler is not working on that day? So we've allowed a lot of variances when they sprinkler these buildings. So we have to make sure that we're aware, know where the sprinklers are, know that there's truss lofts throughout this building, not just in the ceiling area and in the roof area, but the floors are all going to have truss lofts as well. Fire can spread when the plumbers come in and they do all the They put all these holes and if they don't patch them up properly, but get there, take pictures of these and share them with people, pre-plan these buildings, know where the fire hydrants are. Some of these buildings are hundreds of feet long, and what are you gonna do if there's a fire on the backside of the building? Where there may not be an adequate secondary means of egress because they have sprinklers. Can you get the ladder truck back there? I've seen so many of these buildings that you can't get the ladder truck back there. So just be aware that these are going up everywhere, and you need to be visiting these sites as frequently as possible. And they are everywhere nowadays, even in areas that have a lot of rural area, you're seeing that these big apartment buildings are going up. So we must have an awareness of these buildings. I'm going to play a little video here. So this was basically a 10x10 structure. This was part of the fire dynamics boot camp that UL did last year at FDIC, and I happen to be part of it. And you see it goes post flashover. You can see the neutral plane dropping, the area where the fresh air is going in and the fire out, as you see it drop down. But now the importance of this is now they take this gear, they put the gear in front of it, because they want to, at the end, they show you the gear and how much thermal insult it could take. But take a look at the two shirts that are there. One, the white shirt, is 100% cotton shirt, and the other one is a dry fit shirt that's mostly polyester. And that polyester shirt becomes a shrinky dink. And you see they fall down to the ground, and the black one, it just becomes a shrinky dink and melts. They come in a little bit of water, and that fire is knocked down pretty quick, right? So again, I go back to my time as a staff chief in the FDNY, and there were days I would have citywide duties where there was a chance that I could go to a fire. So when there was a chance that I could go to a fire, I wore my dress uniform, my work duty uniform, which is 100% cotton. On the days that I wasn't, that I was just in a support position and I was not going to respond to a fire, I would wear my polyester work duty uniform, dress uniform, which looked nicer. It ironed nicer. It looked more professional when I was not going to fires. And I get firefighters tell me, Chief, if I got to worry about what I'm wearing underneath my gear, I'm in a world of hurt. Yes, if you have to worry about what you're wearing under your gear, you are in a world of hurt, but it's going to be worse if you don't have the proper clothing underneath. So it doesn't matter if you're wearing cotton or polyester until it matters. And that matters when you're sitting in the burn center and they have to scrub your skin off, and the polyester has to be scrubbed off it as well, as opposed to the cotton, which will come off of your skin a lot easier. So that's why work out in whatever you want to work out in. But if you get a run, change that shirt, change into the 100% cotton shirt. That's why we have those rules, is for your safety on the fire ground. In the God willing, you'll never need to use that protection. But if you do, if you wind up in a burn center and you have that cotton shirt on, you are going to be incredibly thankful. And the difference in the recovery could be weeks and months. It don't matter until it matters. But when it does, we should at least know why it matters and what that means. So this is definitely in the ranks of things that pissed me off. All right. So I had to have fire in it, right? Because now if you were falling asleep, you're back, you're awake again. You're welcome. So what is this? This is a video, and there's many like it. And when we transition to a defensive or exterior attack, invariably you hear on the radio, the chief or incident commander will say, we're switching to a defensive attack, all members out, sound the air horns. And I'm like, and then I listen and I'm like, all right, so who can hear when all the air horns are going off on scene? First of all, we clogged the radio with 15 seconds worth of chatter saying we're going to go to an exterior attack. And then, as if we couldn't hear enough, we then put the air horns on. So it is my belief that sounding the air horns when we go to an exterior attack is a residue thinking from a time when we did not have radios, when everybody didn't have radios. So if your department does not have, if your department does not have most of your people on scene having a radio, then keep this policy. But in the FDNY, when I got on the FDNY in 1992, everybody didn't have a radio. Now everybody has a radio. And a second alarm fire will have more than 200 radios on scene. Everybody hears what you're saying. We just amp it up. Your blood pressure goes up, your pulse rate goes up, just the stress level goes up when we start blowing the air horns, and nobody could hear. You see people on scene, they're hunched over trying to listen to the radio. So at least consider removing that as a policy when you go to a defensive or an exterior attack. That's one of the things that I certainly don't like. So here's a video of a Home Depot fire. Does anybody not have a Home Depot in their first due response area? If you don't, you have one in your second due in your mutual aid response, and you're going to go. So that fire was from San Jose, California. It intentionally set fires. Somebody decided they wanted to steal some chainsaws, lit it on fire, didn't realize how bad it was going to be, and burnt down the entire Home Depot. So why do I have this in here? I have this in here to talk about big box and making sure that we are employing commercial tactics on commercial buildings. And think about this, whether you're showing up to a Best Buy, a Home Depot, a Walmart, a Target, or a place of worship, or anywhere else that has a high ceiling. I think about my volunteer department. We go to Walmart. It feels like 4 times a week, which probably even more than that. And when we get there, oftentimes they may have reset the alarm, whatever it is, but it's going to be a false alarm. And on arrival, we look and we say, a lot of times we'll say over the radio, nothing's showing. You know, do you know how much fire for you to have? And if you Google, there's been a couple of fires recently in some Targets and Walmarts. And if you Google those and look at the YouTube videos, there is a significant fire in the building, and you still see nothing from outside because of the volume. Think about the volume of smoke that has to fill up an entire Walmart and then get down to the door level. The Walmart by me is at least 30 feet. So you think about the volume of that, it has to be a tremendous fire for me to see it at the door. So here's the takeaway. If you show up to a place of worship or a big box, Home Depot, any of these places, and it's an automatic alarm, it's an alarm ringing, whatever it is that's going on, we have to make sure that we're maintaining enough situational awareness, because nothing showing is probably going to be, you're going to have nothing showing even if there's a serious fire in that store, because it takes so much for something to be, for it to be showing. So, but by the time it gets down to our level, whether we see it or feel it with the heat, that means you have a very serious fire. The only exception may be if we had a fire that was burning right near the front door, but we have to make sure that we are not being complacent, because we go to these runs so often. And the truth of the matter is, these stores do suffer fires every once in a while around the country. So we have to have a better awareness of that. Speaking of which, brings me to Plainfield, Indiana, where they had a fire in a Walmart distribution center. And this fire is now a couple of years ago. It's still in litigation. I know there's going to be some final reports coming out in the next couple of months. And it's going to really change the way we view these buildings and the way the sprinklers are in these buildings as well. So important considerations, make sure you watch out for that. Here's what I'll tell you. If you show up to one of these buildings, and it could be the Amazon warehouse, because they're building these everywhere, these last mile distribution centers that are just outside of town. It's why you can order something at 3 o'clock in the morning and it'll be delivered by 9 o'clock that morning, or order something in the morning and it comes by night, is because these little places, these little smaller warehouses that are just outside of town, and then these really bigger ones that are stored, that are in the middle of areas that are much less densely populated, and that also usually means that there's a lot less fire protection. So these are going to be a challenge to begin with. When we get there, our first consideration, we have to be worried about life, but we have to be making sure that we are supplying the sprinkler system. Hook up to the sprinkler system, pump it up to its capacity, and let it flow. And let it flow for a minimum of a half an hour. And it's probably going to be more like an hour or 2 hours. And let these sprinklers do their jobs. When we think about emerging technologies, we rarely think of the sprinklers. as a technology, and they are, and the technology has advanced so much that we must go and visit these places and learn what technology they are employing. If you ever have the chance to listen to Shane Ray of the National Sprinkler Association, he does a fantastic job articulating everything about these newer sprinkler systems, which is something in my career, it was always, we got there, we got water on a fire, shut the sprinkler. In these newer buildings, in these larger buildings, we don't want to do that. We want to keep the water flowing. Again, the report's going to be out soon, but these are some of the early takeaways. If you have a fire or an incident in one of these tonight, you know how to operate better, safer, more effectively. But take a look at this picture. I mentioned the tilt slab construction earlier. And if you look at this picture, if you look at this video here, the still, you see that ladder truck that's operating there, and part of the wall is down. So once the roof is down, these walls are susceptible to collapse. And a lot of these buildings are being built like that. Home Depots are being built like that. Walmarts are being built of the tilt slab. Understand tilt slab construction. Take pictures of it while it's under construction. They're the ones that you're going to see the bracing, the metal bracing at a 45-degree angle, often inside and outside the building. And then they remove that bracing once they put the roof on. And what's the roof nowadays? It's going to be a lightweight truss. So just be aware of what's going up in your area, not just in your first due area, but what's going up in your mutual aid area, because these are going to be hundreds of departments that may wind up responding. And I think it was over 100 departments that responded in Plainfield, Indiana as well. This area is not far from where FDIC in Indianapolis is hosted. So stay tuned for more on that, but certainly some really good learning points for that. Charge the system, pump it up, and wait. Make sure you use your flow meters on your rig. Make sure that you're flowing water into the system, and make sure that you're getting augmented enough to maintain the flow that the building is requiring, depending on the number of heads that are operating. The other thing when it comes to these sprinkler buildings is we don't want to cut the roof. In the FDNY and in my department, my volunteer department, we don't cut a truss roof, so that wouldn't be a consideration in a building like this. Obviously, when it's this far gone, it's not a consideration anyway. But the buildings are designed to operate without, with the roof intact. So ideally, a sprinkler building doesn't have anybody cutting the roof, because that would make the sprinklers less effective, because it's going to be, the sprinkler heads are going to be triggered by the heat sensors. So if the fire starts to grow, we want the sprinkler heads to be let off as well to help contain the fire. So when it comes to the FRCE, here's some of the ways that you could follow us on social media with Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. We have, Matt Ryback is our social media guru. He's done a fantastic job. He posts stuff about everything that we're doing all the time. And, if you want to learn about what the FRCE is up to, there's certainly one way to do it is by following us on our social media to see all the cool things that we are going to be doing coming up. Again, this is my link tree that I mentioned earlier. The different ways that you can contact me, a couple different email addresses, where I am largely on social media. And it's never too young to start reading. Is my granddaughter. She'll be 3 soon. And yeah, so I got a couple of books that she gets to read with me. So I did it in under an hour, Ed.
So I don't see any questions. We did have a couple of comments that Robert Brooks had posted in a question about Knox boxes should be required at all businesses, commercial facilities. Current pre-fire planning and Knox boxes give you an advantage. And I don't see anything else so the one thing I want to point out is, and Chief, I'm sure you'll agree, is when people are training, because I know a lot of times here in the East, okay, I live in Pennsylvania for our other listeners, a lot of fire departments in the East try to emulate the FDNY, which is a good thing. But my point is, when you're training and you're pre-fire planning, you have to train based on the resources you have and the resources that are coming to your call. I mean, you mentioned earlier on a second alarm, you would have 20 engines in New York City. I would have to go to a 5th or 6th alarm in where I live, and I would be pulling engines that would be coming from an hour away. And sometimes I think what happens is that we focus on those people that are doing really well at what they do, and we don't pay attention to the resources that we have available to us. So we can't do the same things that you might do at FDNY.
Yeah, so
or a
you're
larger
100%
metro department. You just can't do it.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, so there's a lot of things that departments could learn from the FDNY. There's no doubt about that, right? I mean, the FDNY goes to a lot of fires. Our research and development is second to none. Nobody has what we have when it comes to vetting equipment, to vetting policies and procedures. But you know, nobody has the staffing that the FDNY has. So and the built environment. So all the things you mentioned, the staffing, all of that, you know. Oftentimes in the FDNY, as a chief officer, I had my incident priorities, right? But I didn't really have to worry about them too much because I had enough resources to do everything at the same time. So there's a big difference if you show up with 30 firefighters or 6 firefighters. You have, you know, that determines whether you do things sequentially or whether you do things simultaneously. And if you have to choose between stretching a line, making a grab, searching, whatever it is, right? You have to let your incident priorities dictate that. And I can't sit here and tell you what the incident priorities will be based on, you know, because I don't know your topography, your staffing, the training level, all of the, your equipment, what you're bringing to the scene. There's so many different variables. So, and I'll use exterior water as an example. The FDNY uses exterior water as I would call it a tactic of opportunity. But oftentimes the first line isn't going to be the line that's doing that. The first line is going inside, and then the second line could be stretched simultaneously, where if the first line doesn't get the fire, that they can use it for that. So, but in a department, if you're showing up with three people, well then you better put water on a fire in the fastest way that you can in your department. And oftentimes that might be stretching to the you know, the exposure 2 or 4 side, or you know, or B or D side, whatever you call it, and putting water in from the outside. But even if you're doing that, right, 10 seconds should be enough to knock the fire down and then get inside, because we still have to get inside and search. Regardless, we still have to make sure that our incident priorities and the objectives of saving lives are being met. But how you go about that depends on so many factors that it's not a wise decision to just say, we're going to operate exactly like the FDNY, because there's too many other factors that have to be considered to say that.
So, you know, training, your training should equal the resources that you have available that would typically be available to you, is my only point. Is, you know, and if you train that way, to your point at the very beginning, you know, if you train that way, then that safety mindset's already there. Because, you know, I've trained with a 3-person engine company or a 4-person engine company, and the next engine's going to be 25 minutes out. Or you have no idea how many people may show up on the next engine, especially when you're in smaller communities and everybody's a volunteer. So I just, you know, there's a lot of training out there. There's a lot to be learned from the larger metro departments, but I just, you know, your training has to equal your resources and match the resources that, you know, that you would typically have on a first or
And it's all about training, right? I mean, heart and soul of every organization. And if you're not training, you know, you're doing yourself and your members and your community a disservice. So I saw a question about lithium-ion batteries. Can I answer it?
Sure, absolutely.
All right, so real simple. Everybody's got lithium-ion batteries. I was in my Home Depot not too long ago, and I took a picture, and the entire rack was lithium-ion batteries. Everything was in a green box, and from the lawnmower to everything was lithium-ion batteries. So even if you don't have micro-mobility devices, those scooters, you have them, and they're going to be involved in fires, even if they're not the start of the fire. And with the holidays coming up, the day after Christmas or a few days after Christmas, walk around your neighborhood and see the boxes that people are throwing out. You are going to see many, 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 many boxes that the lithium-ion battery product was in. So what do? We get a fire. We should be assuming that every fire we go to is going to involve a battery. They are that pervasive in society now, whether it's the Roomba that's cleaning, that's vacuuming your floor. It's your computer, it's your cell phone. These batteries are in the children's toys, they're in everything. So a battery goes on fire. Let's say you have a scooter and that's what goes on fire. We need to make sure that before we overhaul, that we are trying to account for as many of those cells as we can, the little cells. In a scooter, there's roughly 100, 120 of those. They look like a AA battery. We want to make sure that we capture as many of those as we can. We should take the batteries and put them into a bathtub, into a sink, into a bucket if we have them. And then we need to get them outside of the structure. We should not elevators. We should not just throw them haphazardly out of the window. We want to lower them from a second floor if we needed to do that. And then possibly overpack the batteries if we're able to. In a rural area, if we leave them in water and have somebody pick them up, that's okay as well. In suburban areas, we kind of got to make sure that they're secure before we leave the scene. But we don't want to be touching them with our hands. We want to be careful with metal tools because we don't want to create a further escalation of the scene once we get there. Use distance, make sure that you're using your SCBA at all times, even to overhaul, which we should be doing anyway, and make sure that that we are using the reach of the stream to the best of our ability as we can. And again, try and account for as many of these batteries as we can before we start dropping the ceiling and everything like that, because we've seen where the fires have, we've gone back to fires 20, 30 hours later, and where we've had to, then re-extinguish a fire.
Okay, so before I go to Andrew Stewart's comment or question, just for our listeners, if you've never joined us before, you'll get a link tomorrow. It'll take you back to previous webinars we did. We did several webinars with Chris Paff and other folks on lithium-ion batteries. The one was almost 2 hours long. We had a good discussion with our friends from across the pond in Europe about lithium-ion batteries and some other things. So there's an opportunity there where you'd be able to pick up on some help with lithium-ion batteries. So Andrew Stewart asked a question: what format of pre-response planning do you have in FDNY? We have a written digital documents which include building context, building construction, building fire safety systems, pump sprinklers, hazardous materials, tactical considerations, map book plans. I see some places are adopting just a map-based platform.
Yeah, so in the FDNY, there's several different mechanisms that we do that. So we have our SIDS program, our critical information, that gives us the a couple of lines for the first in units responding of what they need to know to operate as soon as they get there. So they don't have that much time to read an awful lot of stuff. When we're talking about a high-rise building, for example, we have building building information cards, and those buildings have a lot of information. They have where the pump rooms are, they'll have the elevators, a lot of different information on there, far more than we could fit onto our critical information. And then we also have our buildings and sites that we pre-plan, and those are the site of a drill at least annually, and they have different photographs and stuff that and maps and plans that are all built into our iPad application now that we have, that that all units have. So we're able to get a lot more information better. It used to be in binders, and who knows when they would actually get out of the rig to have them. But these new ones are actually getting used because the chiefs are going to have them for sure out at the command post. So a lot of information as we integrate good technology into what we're doing. These are some of the things that we see over the horizon that can help us, because we don't want technology just for the sake of it's a cool gadget or new technology. It's got to, if it doesn't accelerate my understanding of the fire building and what's at hand, then it really isn't helping me. Otherwise, you wind up with paralysis by analysis, and at some point you got to make a decision because we got to put the fire out. But good information, especially for later arriving units and chief officers that might have the time, I think is important. A great question.
So we're going to get you into human behavior here, Chief. Here's the next question from Dan Murray. Do you have any tips or tricks for increasing buy-in and keeping firefighters more engaged in training programs? Specifically, what strategies have you found most effective for making training sessions more impactful and enjoyable while addressing common resistance or disengagement?
That's a good question too. So, well, be knowledgeable in the topic you're talking about, be passionate about it, care. People can tell when you care about the topic and you care about firefighters. But sound practices have sound reasoning. You should be able to explain the why. If I can explain the why that we do something, and that's important. So when we're talking about whatever it is, whatever the topic, I have to meet you where you're at. And if you don't understand something, or because you have an experience, I have to be able to explain and articulate what you're describing or what you saw. If I can't square your experience, then it's going to be very hard for learning to take place. Whatever that topic is, because you could have had an experience 20 years ago. You could have 45, 50 years in the fire service, and you're saying, yeah, but that's not what my reality showed. But when you can demonstrate and articulate what they may have seen, and a lot of times that goes with flow path and how fast we can or can't put water on a fire. And so I'll use an example of the low intake, high exhaust. I used to hear from firefighters, I've heard instructors say the safest place on the fire ground is with the nozzle in your hand. Well, now we've had several fires where firefighters with nozzles in their hands were seriously burnt, and in a couple of cases they were killed. So we know that even with a nozzle in your hand, conditions can change so fast that you may not have time to open it. So we need to make sure that we're opening the line, flowing water, but somebody may have an experience that goes counter to that. You have to be able to explain that. I have to square your experience before you could learn. Explain it, maybe in a way that you never heard it explained, and then learning can happen. But we also need, so it's a two-way street. You need, when we're talking about whether it's lithium-ion batteries or whatever, energy storage systems or whatever is going to be the next thing over the horizon, we need to have an open mind to see what's coming, because nanotechnology, driverless cars, and our cars just going to be driving. Uber's investing in flying cars. Elon Musk says he could build a tunnel to London where you could get there in 54 minutes. What else is coming? Tall timber, energy storage. I mean, it's endless. What is AR, VR? What is all that going to be? The gamification of learning. How about electric fire trucks? Anybody think electric fire trucks are a fad? That's not coming? New York City has gone on record saying that by 2030, all city vehicles are going to be electric. You think they're going to exclude fire trucks? They're coming. So we better have a seat at the table with all of these, and we better have our eyes open to what's coming down the pipe, because changes continually are happening. And New York City is piloting Chiefs cars that are electric. And if you've driven an electric vehicle, whether you've driven the Lightning Ford F-150 or the Rivian, it's 0 to 60 in like no time. It feels like you're on the rock and roll roller coaster down in Disney. It's amazing the power that they have, and they're incredibly efficient when they're sitting at the scene, not being they're just standing by, not being used. They don't use any power. So and then think about think about hurricanes, right? So the internet is loaded with everybody saying how electric cars don't run after a storm, but because they get flooded. But if we protect our assets properly, electric cars after a storm are probably going to be the only vehicles that run, because you can't get fuel. And in the time frame when people were trying to leave areas that were prone to the hurricane, the gas stations ran out of fuel, where solar vehicles or the solar chargers, those type of things. So we just have to make sure that we're looking at everything and what this is going to mean for us, because some of these things, whether you're in favor of them or not, they're coming. So we need to make sure that we are prepared when these things happen, whatever that is, and just have a seat at the table. Instead of saying it ain't happening, just have a seat at the table.
So there's a comment in here, and you'd have to put, I think you already mentioned about 25 of what's in the future, and that's with those comments, what's your thoughts on the next most impactful change to the fire service? I don't think you can name just one thing, Chief.
So I don't think I could name one. And you want to know the truth? I probably didn't mention. I probably don't know what's gonna be the next emerging issue that's gonna come and hit us when we're not expecting it. And there's so much. I think one of the big things that worries me right now is energy storage systems in residential structures, because all the utilities are starting to realize that they have to make a change because people are going on to solar panels. So now what they've done is they're changing to where they change the price of the electric depending on the time of the day. I just received notification recently, I knew this was coming at some point, that electric at night is gonna be cheaper. Well, that gives me the financial incentive to spend the roughly $6,000 to install a Tesla wall charger. But where are we gonna see these? Because right now, I look at Long Island and so many people have solar panels, but not many people have energy storage systems. So when they start putting these energy storage systems, these battery packs, where are they gonna put them? In the garage? Are they gonna put them on the outside of the house? Are they gonna put them in the basement? We need to have a seat at the table, and we need to make sure that we are that we're engaged in those conversations, because it's coming, because now people have a financial incentive. For the past decade, people were getting solar panels and nobody cared about the energy storage systems because of that. But commercial establishments have had these battery packs for a while, because the utilities on how they charge commercial customers is very different. And they already have the demand meters. So it's economically viable for businesses to have the energy storage systems. Now the game change will be the utilities are changing the rules, and it's going to be there'll be economic incentives for homeowners to put these. And hopefully we don't have them in the basements in below grade areas, because below grade fires are already one of the greatest challenges we respond to. We don't need any compounding that.
I'm going to wrap up here shortly, but the fact that we have people like UL on the hunt for us now, and the other scientific and research people that are trying to get out in front of this stuff, as you said, having a seat at the table. Too many times at the fire service, we don't realize we have a problem until we have the problem, because we weren't looking into the future. And too many, lithium ion batteries is a good example. It was great until we started having all these incidents with them. And I'll point this out. Go to your local Walmarts or Lowe's. Right inside the front door is where you can take your lithium ion batteries to throw away, to dispose. They have a container for disposal. It's nothing more than a garbage can. And people just walk in and throw them into the can. So when I was at the return counter at Lowe's the last time, I said to the young ladies, hey, if you ever see any white smoke vapor coming from that can, get the hell out of the building and call 911. And she was like, why? When I started explaining to her, there they are, like a 55-gallon plastic garbage can where you can take your disposable batteries in and just throw into a container. And she has no idea how often they empty them, how often they take them out, none of that. So I think we've covered all the questions. Chief, do you have any last minute comments for anybody?
Yeah, let's see.
Wait, we did this. Here we go. I noticed you didn't mention the new OSHA rules. If they go through as is, what will it mean for small rural departments are out of the game all because of administration?
All right.
Any thoughts?
They're not going to go through as is. There's still going to be many iterations of this. The OSHA process has been going on now for a couple of years. It'll continue to go on, and it'll continue to evolve. But when standards governing bodies, when they decide to change rules or make rules, right? It's oftentimes because they don't see the people who are responsible for making the rules and enforcing the rules doing it themselves. And I like to say we have to make sure that we're legislating stuff for us so other people don't do that for us. And They probably should have had some changes a long time ago and they didn't. But there's certainly the amount of changes that they're looking to do isn't going to stand. And I think that would be a better conversation when we get closer to knowing what they're going to do, because there's so many great people working on our behalf to do that. But what the OSHA regulation and what that has done has certainly got us more involved, more engaged, because the fire service doesn't have enough people that sit on NFPA committees. We don't have enough people that give feedback to OSHA. Be engaged, and even think about the firefighter rescue survey, right? Be involved in that, right? More than 3,000 documented rescues in firefighter rescue survey. The Mayday project that's going to be coming out, we're going to hear more about that in January. We need our firefighters to be more engaged in the fire service. For years, I've sat on 3 NFPA committees. You don't get compensated for that, but you have a say in what's going on in the fire service, and we need more people to be involved in our fire service. And it is our collective fire service. But Ed, the last thing I want to talk about is the FRCE and the NFFF are having a mental health and suicide awareness symposium with a lot of really fantastic speakers. And there's a limit on the number of attendees. There's only, I think, 200 spots open currently. The registration has been doing well. That's going to be held in Nashville. An opening ceremony is going to be held on the 19th of March at the Country Music Hall of Fame. That's included with your admission to this event. And then on the 20th, Thursday and Friday, the 20th and 21st, is the actual day and a half of the symposium. Mental health and suicide awareness. I know the topic doesn't sound all that sexy, but we have all been impacted by that. And we need more people to be engaged, involved, because at the end of the day, we are all peer counselors. We are all the first line of defense with our brothers and sisters. It's time that we start acting that way and get training and understand some of the blindside issues that are impacting our fire service.
So before we send our information out to all our listeners and the link tomorrow morning, we'll make sure we get the link for the registration for the mental health symposium in Nashville. I'm already registered for it. I'm looking forward to it. The 19th will happen to be my 66th birthday. So my wife's saying, you're going to go to Nashville for your birthday. Well, that's when the program is. So that's where I'll be there.
Bring who in and celebrate that night.
So we're going to wrap up here, Chief. Look, I appreciate your thoughts, and certainly from all the comments in the comment section, so does everybody else. So before we leave, I want you to tell our listeners how they can get their hands on your book, Cornerstones of Leadership on and Off the Fireground. And we'll be sure and include that in our email to everybody tomorrow.
Yeah, so both Cornerstones of Leadership and 35, as you must know, are both available on Amazon. If I'm speaking somewhere, I usually have copies of both. I'll have copies of both at the Suicide and Mental Health Symposium. In fact, I'm going to be taking the stage on both days, but on the first day is just to introduce some people. On the second day, I'll be taking the stage with Chief Dina Alley, and we'll be talking about engineering solutions to wicked problems. It will change the way you think about some of the problems that we're dealing with. And so, yeah, those are the 2 ways to get those books, whether see me in person there or on Amazon. If you see me in person, I'll be happy to talk to you and sign it as well.
And I want to put a plug in for the 30 fires you must know about. One of my former employees wrote one of the chapters in that book regarding the Bob Gallardi incident at the Pennsylvania State Fire Academy. I was originally asked to write it, but I was there in the aftermath. I wasn't there the day it happened. So I asked a good friend of mine who was a senior instructor at the Fire Academy at the time, Pat Pauley, to write that chapter. So at least that one chapter in the book holds a pretty special place in my heart. So I want to remind our audience that there'll be a brief survey we'd like you to complete. Please keep an eye on your email. It'll come that will have your certificate of attendance attached for tonight's webinar. Again, tonight's episode will be uploaded to providentins.com, and you'll receive that link in an email within the next day. Please make sure you check your spam or junk email before sending me an email complaining you haven't received your certificate yet. For those of you who use the webinar as a training for a group of people, when you receive the thank you email for joining us from Sam, there'll be an Excel spreadsheet attached. Please, I'm begging you, please use the Excel spreadsheet with the email addresses and names. It makes life a whole lot easier for me to do your certificates. You can view previous webinars at www.providentins.com and using the training resources link in the upper right-hand corner. Again, please join us January the 14th at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for our first webinar of 2025, when I'll host Rob Brady from Rob Consulting and 2 fire chiefs to have a roundtable discussion on mergers and consolidations. Until then, please stay safe for your family's sake. Have a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.